Hello, honey badgers. Welcome to another WIP and Chat. So tonight I am working with Diamond Art Club's Iron Man, aka Tony Stark. Everybody say, hey, Tony. And tonight we're going to talk about just some of the thoughts and little things that I had to think about and maybe discuss with you guys so you can think about it from this book, Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. He's a UK author. He mainly does fiction, but in the last few years he's dabbled into some nonfiction stuff, mainly talking about his struggles with anxiety and depression. But I learned about him earlier through, very many years ago, through his novels. Particularly, he has his early novels tend to be, he's got a couple at least that are like modern kind of reinterpretations of Shakespeare plays. He's got one that's like, I'm forgetting the name of it now. Forgetting the name of both of them, but he's got one that's like a ghost story that is written around the idea of the story of, Hamlet's father in the play who's a ghost. There's a novel he's written around that idea, but like in a more like modern YA style. And then he's got another one that I read several years ago that has to do with like the relationship between dogs and their owners, but in the novel the dogs can talk to each other. And so a lot of the book is like the conversations that the dogs have with each other at the dog park. And it starts off really nice and happy and then it progressively gets more and more serious. And they talk about like the code that dogs have as far as like being caretakers for their owners. And then like the ending was really hard for me. And he talks about it. He doesn't say that book's name by name in this book, but the way he was describing it, I was like, oh, that's the dog book, because he was talking about dogs being able to talk when he was coming up with the idea for that novel. But then he said it was a translation or a reinterpretation of Henry IV, the Shakespeare play. And I was like, I knew when I read the book about the ghosts, I was like, oh, this sounds a lot like Hamlet. And then I read, oh, it was supposed to be about Hamlet. But when I read the dog book, I was like, and then I read this book, I was like, I don't know how I missed that, because I've read Shakespeare's plays, but I did not get Henry IV from that book. But then when I thought about it this time around, when I was reading this book and reading about and how he came up with that idea and like what happened in Henry IV, and then I was like, oh, I guess I could kind of see that. Yeah, all right. But I was surprised. But anyway, this is his nonfiction work. And I was reading this during last month when it was Mental Health Awareness Month. I read this closer to the time when it first came out. This is a few years old now. I forget what year this originally came out. I want to say like 2018, was it? No, 2015. Oh, well, it was originally published in Great Britain in 2015. I think it was a little bit later in the States. But I remember when that book came out and I read it closer to that time. But then I'm going through this period now where I have a bunch of these authors on my shelves that I've read from years ago. And I'm kind of doing that persistent purge of books and being like, realistically, are you going to do a bunch of rereads of a lot of these books? So I'm kind of in this state where I'm like, I'm doing a lot of rereads of books and then basically letting them go to new people and just holding on to the ones that have like deep emotional meaning to me or whatever. But there's a lot in this book that I thought I would talk about that might resonate with some of my audience here and whoever tends to come across this video down the road. So, yeah, this book, it largely focuses on, he starts off talking about a incident that happened, I think he was in his 20s, if I remember right, and he was living in Ibiza with his then girlfriend. She's now his wife. They had this little house they were renting on this Spanish island, and he said that was sort of like the big one as far as panic attacks, his history of panic attacks and depression, that period of living on the island. I don't think there was anything about the island specifically, that just happened to be where it happened. And so the beginning of the book talks about his experience of what happened with that and where it led him progressively through his, mental health journey, and learning about what works for him, and having things to think about along the way as far as mental illness as a whole. So yeah, I just thought I would talk about all of that. And a lot of what I'm doing as far as like working on Tony here, so you can imagine this is it's kind of one of those odd sizes. It's one of those smaller sizes for Diamond Art Club, but it's a 36 by 32 centimeter, so a little bit bigger than a 30 by 30. But yeah, as you can imagine, this white background took a while to fill in. But once I got that done, all the little circles and stuff came together pretty quickly. And I've now got it down to, I filled in the little circles, but now it's just down to doing these two big ones, which are this orange color here. And then the whole red part of Tony's suit is all this sort of reddish pink AB. So I thought I would save the AB for talking here. Okay, so where to start with this? So in the early part of the book, he describes anxiety as you're basically walking around with your head on fire and nobody can see the flames, which I thought was pretty accurate description of that feeling. I've mentioned to you, whoops, messed that up, hold on. I've mentioned to you guys in videos before that the two main types of anxiety I struggle with are social anxiety and medical anxiety. Everything else I'm pretty alright with for the most part, but and as far as like my anxieties go, I don't have anything that's, whoops, what's going on there? I don't have anything that's commonly pretty crippling, I would say, as far as the anxiety. A lot of what I go through is just I internalize it a lot. Where oops, gosh, that just popped right out. Outwardly, I would look like I was doing pretty okay. And because this is something I've had since I was a child, varying degrees of it. And of course, I've told you guys before that I also have OCD, which is it's grouped in with anxiety disorders. And this is all stuff that I've struggled with since I was a kid. I've had it so long now that I've learned coping mechanisms, so that a lot of times when I'm out in public, as far as the social anxiety, I don't really have it to the point where I don't have a meltdown where I need to leave immediately. Most of the time, I've only had that happen maybe a handful of times in my life where I need to exit stage left real quick. Most of the time I'm fine. I just do like a lot of hand stimming, and then I save the I guess meltdown, you would call it, for when I get home. But really the meltdown is just me doing massive decompressing, as far as I just need to hole myself up in my bed or something for a while and just watch a comfort show or something like that. But inwardly I'm processing all of that. Wow, that was a lot of people. Oh my God, what were they thinking of it? And all that stuff. That's like downloading and decompressing, while outwardly I'm just like, hey, can somebody put on my shows? And then the medical anxiety, which he describes a little bit in his book as well. For some reason this wax does not want to stay in my pen right now. I'm not sure what triggered the medical anxiety specifically, or when that started, but that's just also been something that's kind of always been there. Dang it, what is going on with this? Something about, I wasn't having this trouble earlier. Something about whenever I put it on the ABs, it wasn't doing that one. Because I did this little section before I got on camera. It wasn't pulling up like this a minute ago. Something about the AB coating is ripping my wax out. Now I lost my train of thought. In the beginning, maybe if I rock it back and forth a little bit, maybe that'll help. In the beginning, he's talking about, the analogy. He uses a lot of analogies in this book, naturally, because he's a writer. Damn it, did it again. Dang it, I don't want to have to single place all these. That's going to be annoying. Maybe if I use the other side. Sorry, guys. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, no, I dropped my pen. Okay. What's that doing there? Okay, I got an idea. Let me try something else here. See if this pen works a little bit better. I've discovered this trick I use sometimes when I'm doing like crystal kits. These plastic pens, you've probably seen these around. They have little bunny heads on them, but they have like this squishy sort of rubberized plastic body instead of like a hard acrylic body on the pen. And I've noticed that they have a little bit more give when you place drills, so that you can kind of wiggle it a little bit easier when you have to sort of curve your placement. That's specifically when I'm doing like crystal drills and I have to do kind of odd non-linear lines on stuff. But I thought maybe it would work with these ABs, since for some reason these Diamond Art Club ABs are being persnickety about ripping my wax out. So I might have to go back and forth between the pen and tweezers. So what was I saying? Oh, he was talking about the sort of interesting mix between how physical ailments and mental ailments are responded to in the medical field and in society in general. And so one of the analogies he uses is that, say your leg is on fire. Nobody is going to give you a hard time if your leg is on fire about you saying, hey, this hurts. It's like they're going to think it's completely natural that you're commenting on the pain of your leg being on fire. But for some reason, when you have a mental condition, mental illness, and people can't immediately see what's going on with you, it's more common for people to say, oh, you're being melodramatic, it's not that bad, everybody has a bad day, everybody has sad times, oh my God, get over it. And even medical professionals can be a little bit strained in their treatment. With medical professionals, it's not uncommon for them to just sort of brush you off and say, well, okay, fine, here's a pill. And so it's difficult to get accurate treatment for these kind of things, because you feel like at every corner you're not really being taken that seriously, and it can take a lot of time to finally come across that one medical professional where the heavens part and the harp music comes out and you find that medical professional that just gets what you're saying finally. And that is a pretty magical moment when you find, those people that are there to genuinely help, and they don't think you're crazy and they don't think you're problematic, and they're really quick to be like, no, I think I know what we can do for you. And especially when it's not necessarily always just a quick pill fix, being like, oh yeah, just, load yourself up with these and you should be fine. Because one of the things he talks about is when he was living in this house in Ibiza, and he has this massive panic attack, and it's crippling to the point where his then girlfriend, now wife, Andrea, she looks at him and convinces him to go get checked out of the hospital. And he says that The doctor looks at him and almost immediately decides to give him a heavy dose of diazepam, and basically just tells him, okay, go in this little hospital room over here and go lay it out for a while. So he's in this hospital room for a good little while, and then he starts to think, oh, okay, I think the meds are kicking in because I'm starting to feel calmer. But then what happens is his brain registers that he's starting to feel calmer, and that actually kicks in another whole new panic attack because he realizes, this, and that might, if you've had anxiety and depression, you can probably get what he's saying, because that tends to happen sometimes, where it's like you panic at the thought that nothing is going wrong. You're like, no, that just means it's coming. It's not here yet. And I just, I laugh because I've had that experience of like, why is there nothing wrong right now? You get so used to the shoe waiting, that feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop when nothing is going wrong. You can have periods of like, why is nothing going wrong? That just means something worse is on the way. And so you can actually trigger yourself into a whole new panic attack when you were actually going someplace to try to get help. And it's just this vicious cycle that your brain can put you through, which I only laugh because I've been there, and I know what that feeling feels like, and it is aggravating. But this experience teaches him, see, there goes the freaking marks again. This experience teaches him that, oh, I think I have pill anxiety. And me with having medical anxiety, I was like, oh yeah, I get it. Okay, I think I'm just going to use the tweezers on these, because for some reason these particular ABs they just keep ripping the wax out of my pen no matter what I do. Okay, so I'll just have to single place. Luckily, it's not too much. So yeah, from the Ibiza thing, he decides, you know what, maybe it would be good to go back to my hometown for a little while and, get around mom and comfort food and, see the old childhood comfort locations and all that kind of stuff, talk to old friends. Maybe that would be good for me. And so he tries that, and Andrea goes with him. But then he realizes that that's not an immediate fix either, because he ends up having another bout of mania when he's in his hometown. The struggles he's going with is, everybody, this guilty feeling of people saying, oh, you're being melodramatic and it can't be that bad, and we get people sometimes that are like, oh, what do you have to be upset about? Everything seems to be going great. You got a great partner, you got a good family. What are you freaking out about? Or the other side of that is, if you're the type of person, like I was saying with my anxiety and stuff, where I internalize a lot of it and I've figured out how to mask a lot of it on the outside, where people would say, oh, well, you seem fine. He does something similar with his situations, and he brings up the point that a depressive can have good days in the same way that an alcoholic can have days of sobriety. Because that's another thing he talks about in his story here is all of the back and forth between having both anxiety and depression, and also bouts of alcoholism, progressive alcoholism, which the majority of the book is him talking out how he eventually got through that point. And not that he's all fixed now, because that's not really how the brain works. You don't magically just get over it one day and you're all good and you never have issue again. I think it's more that you just learn how to kind of live with your brain's ebbs and flows, and at least to getting to that healthy point. That's sort of the trick, is just learning your brain's ebbs and flows and not beating yourself up when things happen. And that's a process. It takes time. It takes therapy. It takes different kinds of therapies. Takes a good support system, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen overnight, and you can still backslide here and there. but you, with work, you can get to the point where you can live a pretty successful life, you know? And so as he goes through the book, he's giving little stories about how he eventually, worked through a lot of that mind swamp and got to where he was a lot more peaceful in life, and he could go on and, when he's talking about like him and Andrea eventually got married, and then he became a father, and, he mentions that like back in Ibiza days, he was having such dark thoughts. None of that seemed possible back then, but that is his reality now. And now he's a published author several times over, and has, gotten all these accolades for his work and all kinds of stuff. He's been invited to all the fancy parties, all that kind of stuff. But, it's a process getting there. And one of the big themes he talks about here is, I mentioned the pill anxiety, and the discussion that medications can really work wonders for a lot of people, but they're not necessarily a cure-all for everybody. And that was one thing that I related to, because back in my, I think it was my early 20s, I went through a period where I was on an antidepressant for a long time, because I had gotten to a point where I'd come out of this really rough, I had come out of this really rough, abusive relationship, emotionally, physically. It took everything in me to get away from that situation. And this was, I don't know if I've mentioned him in a video in the past. I don't know. But it was a guy, it was actually the long-term relationship I had prior to my ex-husband. There was a gap of, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I think it was, between ending that relationship and then ultimately meeting the guy that became my ex-husband. But the guy that I was trying to heal from, he was one of those charmer, nice guy types that ended up having a mean streak in him, which could also be applied to my ex-husband. I had to go through a lot of healing to stop attracting those guys. But the first one, though, it was particularly bad. My ex-husband was never physically abusive with me, but that guy before him literally attempted to end my life one night, because I finally got fed up with the physical abuse. And keep in mind, this was when I was still in my early 20s, and I was dating someone that was significantly older. I mean, not like old, but I think at the time I think I was, when this all went down, I was just shy of 25, and this guy was 34, I think, ish, somewhere in there. That's why now when I see really young girls dating older 30s, early 40s guys, there's a part of me that's just like, girl, be careful. Because you don't know what's up in that noggin. Because I went through that phase where I was like, oh my gosh, my early 20s, I'm like, oh, I love a mature older man. And then the guy tried to strangle me, because he had some aggression issues that I was tired of putting up with. And so I tried to do the mature thing of like, okay, I don't think this is quite working out for us. And I thought it was going to be a calm breakup thing like any guy I dated before. And he did not take it that way. And it became this whole thing in my life that I was not expecting. I didn't anticipate that this guy was going to be stalking my apartment at night and beating on the windows at like 3 a.m. and shouting obscenities and calling me at weird times of the day and showing up at places I wasn't. It was dangerous for a while. And I finally got to where I could actually move and not have him know about it. And but that there was a whole period of my life where it took its toll on me, and I was still trying to hold down my job, and I had something in me cracked, and I went to, well, first my general practitioner, and said, and trying to politely give a rundown of what was going on. And because I had gotten to the point where I was so numb, I was just staring at a wall. I knew I had to go to work, but I couldn't get out of bed. Like my body felt like literal cement. And if I could sit up, I would just burst into tears. And I remember going to the doctor. I somehow managed enough energy to get to my doctor, and I talked to her, and I was just like, look, if I don't get some help, I'm going to lose my job and I'm going to be homeless. And I just like, I had a little freak out in her office, and she's like, okay. And so she ended up putting me on a antidepressant, and it worked enough to where I could do my job. And this was when I was still working luxury hotel management, and my job involved me going, like, there's a certain presentation you have to do with those jobs. You have, like, if you think of like the if you think of the hotel manager in Pretty Woman, you know how he had to be very animated and know all the answers and have, you know, like a certain element of class and sophistication because of the clientele he was working with. Like, that's what my job was. I had to go in and I had to bring out my English major voice and my customer service voice. And again, I was in my early 20s when I was doing this job, but I had this high profile job where I had to act like I was a good 10 years older. And people often thought I was at the time, where they're just like, wait, what? You're how old? Because I had to be able to pull it off with the people that had that level of money. I had to, you know, how to do fine dining service and wine and cheese hour and all that stuff. And it's really hard to pull off that level of me if I'm struggling to even get out of bed. And that was a really good job for me at the time. I did not want to lose. And so it numbed me enough to where I could pull off my job, but there was also there was the personal part of me. It almost felt like it got switched off, and I just felt very zombified every time I went home. So like, I wasn't necessarily crying, and I didn't have the cement feeling anymore, but I did feel like a part of my brain got shut off, like a part of my brain that I kind of liked, like the personality part of my brain, that just felt like it was gone. And I was just going through the motions, and I was like, okay, well, I don't want to live like this either. And I went through a really stressful part of my life where I was just like, okay, is this going to be my life now? And so that's when I kind of went into deeper therapies and eventually came to the conclusion, similar to what Matt talks about in his book, where I was like, I might not be a pill person. I think I have to figure out something else. And so that's when I was doing things like I got more and more into my hiking, and I took more art classes. And that's one of the things he mentions is when he decided he didn't want to go the pill route, he decided he wanted to do he got really into running and doing very like in-depth mind absorbing tasks. He got really into reading and that kind of thing, which I say all this as I'm doing diamond painting, because I've mentioned in videos in the past, one of the big things that got me into diamond painting was the fact that it sort of channeled my OCD in a healthy way. and calmed down sort of like, the tendency for my brain to go off the rails with more, manic style thoughts. It gives me something to channel into, and so it's calming to me when I can just go into this, and I can do things like, if you look at the community tab, when I mention like documentaries, recommend documentaries, that kind of thing, that's usually because that tends to be what I do a lot of the times, is I'll put on movies or documentaries and I'll just do these lines, these drill lines, for long periods of time, and that will just be really calming to me. And if I'm not watching those movies, it's still good, because if I'm not running the movies or the documentaries or whatever, then I'll have music playlists going, something like that. And there's something to this sort of rhythmic, controllable process to this that also, I've jokingly said it kind of helps me channel thoughts, as far as like if I need to discover a solution to something, or if I need to think out a problem, but like in a calm way. I do it a lot better when I'm doing this. And I'll zone out for a while, and I won't think about whatever it is I'm stressing about in the rest of the part of my day. And I'll just do this for a while, and then out of nowhere, the solution to what I was concerned about before will just hit me. I'm like, oh, all right, well, and then I'll just make a calm little note of like, oh, okay, that's something to look into. So yeah, there's been a lot of benefits to this, as far as, when he talks about mind absorbing tasks. But I mean, a lot of people in the diamond painting community, you guys know, you've been there. There have been a lot of other videos I've watched from other creators that have talked about their background and how they got into it. And there are a lot of similar stories with people that have had, either rough relationships with past partners, or their families, or just life in general. It comes in all different forms. So with Matt's story, he mainly talks about picking up running. And it was funny. What was it he said? The thing that got him into it was, he mentions running is commonly cited as an alleviator of depression and anxiety. And I sort of laughed at that, because I was like, not for all of us. I just kind of jokingly had the thought, I'm always much more sad when I come back from running. But that's just because I kind of think about, it's not that I'm like exercise opposed, because, prior to my limbs gradually giving out on me, I used to be pretty super active. There was a period in my life where I played volleyball, and I played defender in soccer, and I was a lifetime long distance hiker. Started hiking when I was like 6, and did it my whole life up until my symptoms got bad enough from the hypermobility and lymphedema and stuff, to where it got really difficult to do those long distances anymore, which broke my heart, because that was like one of my big things. That was one of my big personality identifiers that I related to, was like, if anything else, I could just go up in the hills, and I can't really do that in the same way anymore. It's like, not that I can't hike at all, but I've mentioned before that it's not considered, with all the stuff I have going on in my body, it's not considered safe or practical for me to just go up in the hills by myself anymore, because something could happen. That could happen with any hiker, regardless. There are always risks to hiking, but especially with the conditions I got going on in my limbs and stuff, it's not medically recommended that I do that risk. But one of the discussions I remember having with my doctor shortly after I was diagnosed with everything, and she was sitting there with me, and I've lived with it for a number of years now, so it's not quite as bad a freak out, but I still remember like that first week of getting all the news of everything and going through that. Okay, what does it mean? And she was trying to make it seem, not quite so bad. And she was like, okay, well, if you're careful, there's a lot of things that you could probably still do for a long period of time. Because that's the thing I look at, is that there's a lot of things that I can still do now if I go kind of slow with it. But there's a lot of people that have the medical situation I do, that it's not uncommon for them to end up in progressive situations where they are either wheelchair bound partly or completely, or they have home health aides and all. And I've tried to be really careful about prolonging that as long as possible, because I have a lot of like comorbidities. It's not just one thing going on. So it's like a lot of the comorbidities are fighting against each other, and they're all genetic. They're all stuff that my parents coded into me, apparently. But one of the discussions we had was, she was saying, there's a lot of things you can probably still do for a long time, as long as you're, careful about it, and you go a little bit slower about things, and precautions are made, and you have all the right gear and all that kind of stuff. But the sort of asterisk she put on it was, maybe a few of the things we stay away from is, she's like, okay, maybe you do kind of more mild trails if you want to attempt hiking with a friend, but like maybe we don't do Everest. Maybe we take that off the list. And I was like, all right, fair enough. Because like that wasn't ever on my list anyway. But yeah, we got to put the line somewhere, I guess. But then she was like, okay, but also really, I don't want to hear news of you anywhere near like a marathon track unless you're just like in the stands. Could you promise me that? Because really, it's not a good idea. So that was like one of the big things, is like, not only no, but hell no, asterisks of like, please don't even think about attempting it. So that's why I laughed at the running comment of like, not gonna do me a lot of good. But I do understand the benefit of it, because I do have a childhood friend of mine. She lives out in the LA area now, but I think her kids are I think they're pretty close to middle school age now. But back when they were like, not newborns, but like toddlers, I guess, her and her, the kid's father, they went through kind of a rough breakup, like a really, really rough breakup that sort of did her in mentally for a while. And she went through a period where she was really struggling, and then she got the idea of like, basically she started with going for runs in like the LA foothills area, the trails they have up there. She was doing that for a little bit, and then she got into a running club, and now she's been doing that for several years now, because she was like, oh my gosh, this is helping me so much. And now she's escalated into what do they call it, like ultra marathon running, where you go like super long distances for miles and miles on like stretches of road, kind of like almost like like in Forrest Gump when he's running, was it, they got like Bob Seger playing in the background or something, and then he just stops like, I want to go home now. It's kind of like, I think they call it like ultra marathon running or something like that, ultra running, something like that. But yeah, she does that now, where she has these periods where every so often she'll just drop the kids off with her mom and be like, okay, I'm going on an excursion. But it's helped her so much mentally. So I definitely understand the appeal of it. And like in here, Matt brings up a really good point where he talks about how, he's talking about how like I was saying with when you have these medical conditions and the doctors try to separate medical conditions and physical conditions, because it's happened to me when I've tried to go and get something checked out by my medical, like my general practitioner, but it's more like maybe mentally based, and they'll say, oh, well, that's not really my field, that's not really my specialty. And I get it, like I get that people specialize in different parts of the body, but it is like he points out in the book, he said it is kind of funny though, because you're trying to get help for a mental condition, but a lot of the symptoms you're dealing with are very much physical, as far as like, you think about shortness of breath and sweatiness and, sweaty palms and loss of appetite or extreme changes in appetite. Maybe you go from like starving yourself to binging or something like maybe you experience heart racing, all that stuff. You go through all these like physical ailments, but then your doctor is like, yeah, but that's not really my field though. It's like, but my body is physically freaking out. Can you not do something? But yeah, I get that everybody has their specialty and you have to go where the specialist is. But one thing Matt points out is if you think about running, what if you take the symptoms of anxiety and that tend to happen, like I said, with the shortness of breath and elevated pulse and sweatiness and extreme thirst and heart racing and all that stuff, those are also very much symptoms of running for a long time. So he's like, so if you go and do running and you experience all of those things, then your body and your mind can rationalize it as, oh, well, this is physical exertion. This has got nothing to do with anything going on in the mind. So that's fine. You're just doing a physical thing. So we don't have to freak out. So you can have the break from the hamster wheel for a little while because your body's just rationalizing it as, oh, you're just exercising. That's not a big deal. But but then the also the other benefit or bonus is that if you wear yourself out physically and you're focused on the tension and fatigue in your legs and chest and stuff, you don't really have any energy really to give the spastic mind monkey, right? So that mind monkey is just gonna kind of find a corner and go pout for a while because you can't pay attention to him right now. You're worried about your legs freaking out. So yeah, I understand the benefit and the appeal of it, just not for me. It's kind of like when I get people that will really try to tell me if they hear me talking about having like autoimmune disease, and they'll be like, oh my God, you should totally do cold plunge. And me, just personally, I've, having survived hypothermia twice in my life, I'm like, I get it, but also not for me. I just, yeah, it's fine. It was fun for a little bit. But no, that's all right. The most cold plunging I do these days is when I do my hair henna treatments at home. And if you've ever done henna treatments, or if you've ever done like any hair dyeing treatments at home, the tip is to plunge or rinse your hair in cold water because it'll help you retain your color longer. You're not washing as much of the pigment out, so you don't have to do the dye jobs quite as often. So yeah, that's the closest I get to cold plunge anymore, is whenever I have to do the cold water plunge in the tub to retain my henna treatments. And that's good enough for me. But again, I've done those periods of when I've had to take colder showers because when I was talking about the ex I had earlier that tried to end me, that was the last time in a long ass time that I dated anyone anywhere near my height. There's only been about maybe 2 or 3 guys in my lifetime that I've dated that have been under 6 foot. And, you know, I know short guys are just like, oh, she's got a thing, you know, and I'm not against dating short guys, but, you know, after that one that tried to end me, you could understand why I went back to the Sasquatch guys. But one of the things about dating Sasquatch guys, if you're not in the know, a lot of them tend to overheat. They run very hot. And this has been confirmed by all of them. This wasn't just me kind of guessing. They've all mentioned it. And my ex-husband was no exception. He was just shy of 6'3" and like 230 pounds. So yeah, big old dude. And he was constantly doing cold showers, and he was also, there were a lot of like financial limitations in my relationship, as far as like, you know, being financially roped. I'm trying to find a polite way of saying this, because I'm not here to really talk shit, but it's just like, as my experience, there were a lot of financial crimpings, I guess, that were put on the relationship, as far as I went the majority of it was only until okay, so it was only until about a few months ago I went my whole relationship with that guy doing minimally warm showers, because he didn't want to pay the money to have it at normal heat. And I'm still living in this house now, and I finally talked him into upping it to where it was a normal temperature for me, and I wasn't taking polar bear baths all the time. So that's another reason why I'm just like, nah. And also because it harkens back to, you know, I mentioned growing up dirt poor before, and that was another thing I had in my childhood. Is there was a time, I don't remember how it happened originally, but there was a time where, when I was a kid, you know, I grew up in a trailer park, and something happened with the tub, and it stopped working properly. And so the majority of my childhood in that trailer, until we moved when I was like 16 and I could live in a place that I had hot water again, the majority of my childhood was taking only minimally warm showers, and we had to like boil the water and live like pilgrims and all that kind of stuff. And so that's why now I'm also like, I am unapologetic about any warm showers I have, and I do not take them for granted, because the majority of my life I have not been able to have them. So that was one of the things that sounds weird, but that was one of the things that I really fought for when my marriage technically ended, but I'm still living in this house that we used to live in together. That was one of the things where I'm just like, for the love of God, can we get the shower working properly? And so that's also why I give a lot of crap to like, jokingly. I don't, you know, I'm not really offended by it in seriousness, but like, playfully give a lot of crap to people when they bring up cold plunge, because I'm like, dude, I've been doing cold plunge all my life. I am at the pampering stage in my life now where I am unapologetic that I need a freaking warm shower. But you do you. But yeah, that's one of the things that Matt also gets into, is the idea of doing what works for you. There's a line he says where he's like, hell, if licking wallpaper helps, do that. Like, don't be unapologetic about whatever is working for you, because the thing about anxiety and depression is it's very unbiased in who it gets to, how it gets to you. It does not care about your race, religion, tax bracket status, any of that. It hits homeless people and millionaires alike. It hits, you know, the peasants and the celebrities alike. It does not care. You know, he even mentions in one of the lines, he says, some of the toughest, most brilliant, most talented people in history have struggled with depression, and we need to talk about it. And I think we do need to talk about it, because that's true. A lot of your favorite people throughout history have all had their struggles, often silently. There's been plenty of people documented in history that will put on a smiley face, and then something will happen and the real story will come out, and you hear people all over being like, oh my gosh, I would have never guessed. And I think part of that is, yeah, I'm speaking from my own experience, is there are a lot of people that will share all the nice memes, all the, you're not alone and all that stuff. They'll share all that online, but, and they'll say the nice things like, oh, don't be afraid to reach out. But then if you've experienced things with anxiety and depression, you've probably run into this too. When you actually do reach out to somebody, it's not uncommon for the person to kind of tune you out or make the conversation about them. And there's a lot of people in the world who are just really shitty at listening, like really listening to somebody who is maybe not the best at getting the really hard feelings out, but they're trying. And then you run into somebody that makes it about them or tries to diminish what you're talking about. I mean, turning into one of the people that are like, oh my God, it's not that bad. And all of a sudden you don't have that Instagram version of the friend anymore. You have the I don't have time for this friend. And so when you go through that enough times, it's not uncommon for people to just be like, you know what, I'll just keep it to myself. And I've definitely gone through that feeling before. That's why I don't go into a lot of heavy depth about a lot of my story, because I've had enough experiences of, people only want to hear it to a certain extent. And a lot of things with mental illness, you get plenty of celebrities that they will talk about, we need to talk about mental illness and you're not alone and all that stuff. But they also present it in a very palatable way. There's very few celebrities you come across that will get, down and dirty with their story. Sometimes they will, but you also see it with them. Like if they get down and dirty with their stories, those are usually the ones that have people react of like, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. Oh gosh. You're just putting it all out there, huh? But if you look at the people that give you the more palatable, lighthearted version of like, yeah, we all go through struggles, then you get people that are in their comments being like, oh my God, you're so brave, because you gave them the more palatable version, and people can feel it's not too threatening, and people can feel good about sharing each other's stories. But if you give them like the real version, then people are weirded out and they're like, oh my God, this is a lot. So I think even with celebrities, they get to the point where they give you the palate cleanser version and keep the super heavy stuff for themselves. And, that's when you get the stories in the news of like, oh my God, I never knew anything was happening with that guy. So yeah, I think a lot of it stems from just society as a whole is just made up of a lot of people who, like I said, are pretty shitty listeners. And I think it's just that happens when you start developing a society that is so short attention span. I mean, think about it. How are you going to have really amazing listeners if people can't get past something that's longer than like a 30-second reel? If it's too much for them to sit through that with somebody that they're supposed to be caring about, it's no wonder that there's a mental health epidemic. Because, with mental health, sometimes it takes a minute to get to the heart of what's wrong. Sometimes you got to spend a good long night listening to people and letting them talk it all out and cry it out and scream it out, whatever they got to do. Like the number of times I've had to be the person for my friends, either literally or figuratively talking them off a ledge. That stuff doesn't get wrapped up in 10 minutes. Like sometimes that can be an all-night thing. It can take a few days. Sometimes you got to do like the the watches on your friends to make sure, like, are you okay for real though? I've never had any friends have to do that for me, but I've been on the other end of it where I've had to keep an eye on my friends that seemed particularly edgy, where I wasn't quite sure if they were going to be all right or not. And I've gone on to lose a friend here and there that, because as much as you want to, like, at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want to do, and it sucks. But that's why I like doing these videos, where I genuinely want to talk about it and genuinely want to share stuff and, make it feel like it's okay, that someone at some point is going to hear this when they need to, and they're not going to feel bad about feeling what they need to feel. And they can have somebody they can feel like is talking to them, and it's not a burden, and they know that there's at least one other person that's been through, the fires they've been through. And it's not too much, and it's not scary. At least for me, like, I'm not saying it's not scary for you. I'm just saying it's not scary for me to hear it, because I've witnessed and lived through plenty of terrifying things. So, that's one thing I always tell my friends is I say, I promise, the things I've seen in my life, I promise you're not going to scare me. I've seen some dark shit and got on the other side of it. So it's all right. You're not going to scare me. You're not going to freak me out. I'm not going to say it's too much, because I've been on the receiving end of that, and I know how bad it hurts to have somebody be like, ugh, not this again. Because it burns when, like, you're trying your best and you're trying to find the answers, and, you hear people say, oh, you're not alone, and just talk if you need to, and you try to take them at their word, and then they seem surprised that you were taking them at their word and that you are actually trying to reach out for help. And they'll be like, oh, now is not a good time. That sucks, like, to be left out in the wind like that. So, yeah, I like to make these videos now and then, to at least be one voice that's like, we don't have to sugarcoat it, and I'm not scared to talk about things, and I want to help get people over the hump when they need it. So yeah, that's have a space where, we don't have to be scared to talk about the harder aspects of it, and show people that need to hear it that, there are people in your corner. There are people that have been where you're at, and they've gotten on the other side. And, we're not, I think that's probably why there's a certain portion of people that go through the things they do, so that, there's always going to be a certain population of people that can get you through this when you need it. Because imagine how hard it would be if nobody got through to the other side, and you were just a society of like, I don't know what to do, fuck. How great is it that there are people that are wired to the point of, not that it's not hard for them, but they're wired enough to survive things and and be the type of people that are like, yeah, whatever, hit me again, I'm not scared. The downside of that, though, is, I guess, society-wise, it can be harder for you to find your people, basically, which is, like I said, one reason why I like to make these videos sometimes, so that people can feel like there are people like them out in the world, because that's another thing that I've experienced is going through situations where I've had to become a version of me that maybe wasn't ideal. It wasn't always the softest version of me, but I had to take on certain aspects of that version of me in order to survive where I was at that time. And then it can be really hard to shake off those harder versions of you. And then when you take them out in the world again, that's often when you get a lot of people that are just like, ew, that's a lot. And you don't always want to get into like, yeah, it is. But you don't want to go into your whole backstory, because then if people thought you were a lot just because you're a little bit rough around the edges, if they got into your backstory, God, the brain melt you could expose them to. So there is a part of it where you just have to sort of accept that your circle might be kind of minimal, because the way you had to learn how to survive things, it's not going to be palatable to everybody. But that's okay, because you were formed the way you were for a reason, and you needed to be the way you are, because the way you are is going to help somebody else down the road who's especially going to need it, and they're going to need you to be the way you are. So it's all right if not everybody finds you to be the perfect peachy princess. As long as you help the people that you're meant to help, that's what matters. But yeah, anyway, I got off track with all that. But yeah, he talks about getting into running and just figuring out what your process is that is really working for you. There's a lot in this book that reads sort of like a bullet journal style, in that sometimes he'll write in like an essay. The essays will be like anywhere from, I don't know, 2 to 4 pages, but then he'll also have other pages where it's just like bullet journal entries, almost like just dot lists. And I like the chapters he puts on some of these, because he has one chapter, I just like the honesty of it. He has one chapter he calls How to Live, 40 Pieces of Advice I Feel to Be Helpful But Don't Always Follow. And then the last chapter of the book he titled Things I Have Enjoyed Since That Time I Said I'd Never Enjoy Anything Again. Which I thought was cute and sweet. But talking about those, hold on, let me figure out where the book is. Okay, so let me go to some of these lists. So on that 40, what is it? 40 things I find helpful list, I thought I would just mention a few of them that I liked best. So some of the ones that stood out to me, number 10, he says, wherever you are at any moment, try and find something beautiful. A face, a line out of a poem, clouds out of a window, some graffiti, a wind farm. Beauty can clean the mind. And then 20, he also says, look at trees, be near trees, plant trees. I don't know, trees are just great. Trees are great. I love trees. That's one thing I notice whenever I go on walks and stuff. I am constantly looking at treetops and looking for like, hawk nests and eagles nests. I'm always, since the time I was little, I've always been curious about what's going on up in trees. And I've spotted things so many times just because my mom used to give me crap about it when I was little, because she was just like, sometimes you have to look forward. You can't always look up, because she's like, you're going to hit something. But that's always been the way I've been wired. 31, he says, 3 a.m. is never the time to try to sort out your life. And for some reason that just made me think of the Matchbox 20 song. It's 3 a.m. I must be lonely. 32, what it was 32. Oh, 32, he said, remember that there's nothing weird about you. And I was like, it's debatable, but it's fine. 34 says, don't worry about the time you lose to despair. The time you have after will just double in its value. So that was pretty cool. But I really liked 40, where he said, be brave, be strong, breathe, and keep going, and you will thank yourself later. But then also in that chapter, last chapter, things I have enjoyed since the time I thought I would never enjoy anything again. I thought I would just read you like the first little chapter, because it's the whole thing is, it's just an essay of it's basically just a list of things that he's really enjoyed that goes on for like a couple of pages. But I thought I would share this because I do get that question from my friends sometimes when they're in a dark place. They'll say, you know, oh, okay, go ahead, convince me what there's worth living for anymore, or convince me there's a God, or, you know, when you get those dark thoughts and you're just like, no, tell me what there's still worth living for. So if you are in that place, I thought I would share just some of these things as just something to think about. It says, sunrises, sunsets, the thousand suns and worlds that aren't ours but shine in the night sky. Books, cold beer, fresh air, dogs, horses, yellowing paperbacks, skin against skin at 1 in the morning, long, deep, meaningful kisses, short, shallow, polite kisses, all kisses, cold swimming pools, oceans, seas, rivers, lakes and fjords, ponds, puddles, roaring fires, pub meals, sitting outside and eating olives, the light fading in the cinema with a bucket of warm popcorn in your lap, music, love, unabashed emotion, rock pools, swimming pools, peanut butter sandwiches, the scent of pine on a warm evening in Italy, drinking water after a long run, getting the all clear after a health scare, getting the phone call. With this, I think he means it in a good way. I know sometimes people will say, oh God, I got the call. This, I think, because earlier in the book, he talks about the exhilaration of being told he's getting published for the first time. I think that's what he means by getting the call. Will Ferrell and Elf, talking to the person who knows me best, pigeon pose, picnics, boat rides, watching my son being born, catching my daughter in the water during her first 3 seconds, reading The Tiger Who Came to Tea, and doing the tiger's voice. So just some things. And then he also talks about, I thought I would close with this, these last little thoughts. So he talks about something to think about is if you get overwhelmed with your situation, something to think about is that happiness isn't great for the economy. And this is just something to help keep things in perspective. So happiness isn't great for the economy. And how can companies keep pushing consumerism if everyone is just content with what they have? Nobody's going to make money that way, right? So what happens? We get progressively sold these ideas of, hey, we need you neck deep in FOMO. We need you stressing out about your age and your weight, and is your ass perky enough? And what about your house and your car? Are they enviable enough? Are you making enough money? Is your job impressive enough? Should you travel more? How sad is your closet? You know, and oh my God, how old is your phone? Upgraded already? So you see what happens to us is that we're bombarded with these ideas of we're not good enough. And it's not that we're actually not good enough. It's that people want to sell shit because that's what pays for their nice lifestyle. But something to take comfort in is just remembering that not one person on the planet is 100% perfectly healthy. Not one person on the planet is 100% perfectly mentally healthy. Every person on the planet has some little quirk, some little glitch going on in their body that they struggle with, that they're trying to remedy in some way. Whether that's mental or physical, everybody's got their thing. Some people's things are a little bit more complicated, but everybody is within their right to acknowledge their thing. Everybody's got something within their body that is just a little bit off. And that's not to minimize anybody's health experience or to say that your experience is less important than anybody else's. It's just to say that if you ever get to the point where you start having those thoughts, and I mention this because I've had these thoughts, when you get to those places of feeling like I'm alone in the world and nobody gets this and nobody understands this pain and I will never get past this pain, all those kind of like dark thoughts where you feel very hopeless and lost at sea and all of that stuff. It just, it helps to kind of bring it back in and remember that there are people that are experiencing what you are experiencing. You just may have not found them yet. Even if you haven't laid eyes on them, it does help to think that there's a tribe out there somewhere of people that have been where you're at and have fought the battles you fought. They're still fighting them. You know, a lot of these conditions, a lot of these situations, there's no real like definitive end to it. You just learn to comfortably live with it a lot of times. But everybody's trying to work it out in their own way. So you don't need to feel alone. And I don't mean that in like the cleansed version I was talking about of like, you're never alone, but then like nobody is there to help you. Like, I'm genuinely saying, you know, you might not be able to lay eyes on them right in the instant, but they are out there. There are people out there that get what you're saying. They get what you're struggling with. You know, even with me, you know, that was one of the things that I ran into when I was first diagnosed with lymphedema tarda, and they told me that it was a congenital form that doctors knew even less about than traditional lymphedema. And even with traditional lymphedema, it's not widely studied by the majority of the medical field. But even so, I still came across people every so often that had the type I had. A small percentage, but they are out there. And I found them largely thanks to Instagram, which is funny because like years ago, I remember when Instagram first started, I was like, oh yeah, I don't think that's anything that I would be interested in. That's fine. At the time, I was content with my little circle on Facebook, but then Facebook got weird and like old people political ranty, and that wasn't my circle anymore. So then I started moving over to Instagram, and then that's when I started coming across people. I started sharing little bits of my story, and I started coming across people that are like, hey, I get it, and oh my gosh, it's another lymphy, which is, it's weird, but it's also comforting. So somewhere, some way, there is an avenue out there for you to find your people, and your people are out there. They just maybe don't know how to find you yet, or you don't know how to find them, but they are out there. And even if people don't have exactly what you have, there are a lot of experiences that can overlap as far as like symptoms or situations or feelings. They might not have exactly what you have, but just having a sense of community in any sense can help a lot. If you have people that are just like, hey, maybe I don't get it, but we're happy to have you here. So yeah, you don't have to feel lonely like that. You just have to kind of put yourself out there, which I know when you're going through a lot of this stuff is like the biggest ask, but sometimes you got to take that first big brave step and be like, okay, I'm going to do it and I'm not going to die. And you won't. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. And that's one reason why on my channel, regardless of what I'm talking about in my own life, I don't put any stipulations on people's backgrounds. I try really hard not to try to make people feel isolated as far as like you have to be a certain way to feel comfortable on my channel. I never want to do that. I want to take in, as far as viewers, build a community of people from all walks of life. I have no issue with anybody from any religion, from any race, from any, political or financial background, whatever. I just want good people. That's it. That's the one stipulation I have. Just don't be a dick. And that's been my house rule for I don't know how long. You know, people got like the long lists of house rules. That's from the time I got my first apartment by myself. That has been my house rule. Don't be a dick. And I remember years ago I mentioned that to my former mother-in-law, and she kind of gave me this weird look. And she was like, that's it? That's what you don't want to add anything to that? And I was like, well, everything falls under that if you think about it. You know, if you're not being a dick, you don't have to worry about what people are saying or we only talk about these things, or like, don't be a dick. You can include all those things of like, we show respect and we enjoy humor and all, like that all falls under don't be a dick. And that's been my house rule since, I don't know, like I was like, I don't know, 18, 20 years old, something like that. And I thought it was funny because I remember several years ago, I remember watching this interview with Willie Nelson and his wife, and they were sitting on the tour bus, and the interviewer asked them, are there any big tour bus rules? And they both said in unison, don't be an asshole. And I was like, well, that's funny that they're basically using the same rule, just different verbiage, I guess. But yeah, I'm basically running my house the same way as Willie Nelson, which I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, that's my big house rule because I feel like that encompasses everything. And so I use it on this channel as well. The big house rule is don't be a dick to each other. But I'm not going to comment cleanse on too much on my channel unless it gets like real bad. Most of the time I don't edit my comments. Like if you want to say something that's, not a complete ass pat for me, I don't care. Thank you for the engagement. This is fine. I've had plenty of verbal abuse in my life. It's all right. I got strong shoulders. I can take it. But yeah, one thing I just wanted to close this whole video out, this whole topic, is one of the things that, I talked about Matt Haig using a lot of metaphors in this book to talk about mental illness and the struggles and all that. One of the things he uses is this metaphor of, a lot of people describe mental illness as like a dark cloud. You hear that metaphor a lot. And he talks about that here. And he says, if you think about the dark cloud and you think about that cloud in the sky, that imagery, the thing is, clouds can't exist without sky, but a sky can exist without a cloud. We've seen it numerous times, a beautiful cloudless sky. And it's always kind of amazing when you see it, because you tend to comment, oh my gosh, there's not a cloud in the sky today. But clouds can't exist without the sky to hold them. So the thought behind that is to totally acknowledge your cloud that you have, but learn to work with the cloud. Just understand that, clouds are usually an indication of a storm, a weather pattern. Weather, storms, clouds, these are all things that pass, and something else will be behind it. But if you think about the sky, what's behind that cloud typically? It's and you've probably seen this if you've ever flown anywhere and you're up in the cloud line and you look at the plane goes up and it goes over the cloud cover, and you're on top of the clouds, and you're sitting out in the plane. You're not sitting out of the plane. That's not recommended. You're sitting in the plane looking out the window. And, I've been on flights before where you can look out at the clouds and you can tell if there's a storm going on somewhere because you can see the darkening, but you're above it and you can see the sun going on. And so that's something to think about, is that behind all of those clouds, there's typically this beautiful, dazzling, bright blue sky that's going to be there no matter what. So yeah, just remember yourself as that big blue dazzling sky that is just so electric blue it almost looks like a cartoon. That you have to think of yourself as like, that's what's down in there, and you just have to wait for the clouds to pass. And even if it takes a minute for the clouds to pass, the other thing you could think about is how much beauty there is still within a cloud cover, and how much people still like rainstorms, and how much beauty we still find in cloud formation. If you think about being a little kid, how many times we would lay on the ground and pick out animals from cloud shapes. There's an aspect of beauty to be found in all of these different, parts of you and the weather patterns of your mind. It's, if you think of it in that terms of clouds and seasons and all of that, just keep in mind that it's a season, not a sentence, and if you think of it that way, you can also remind yourself that every season has its own form of beauty. Every season that we go through, there's something in every season that we look forward to. Even though we're going to have inclement weather in every season, there are still things about every season that we look forward to. So just something to think about. And that's why I called this, beauty in every rain cloud, because that is something that I try to remind myself of as well, is that it's a season, it'll pass. It's a phase of the moon. I know it's hard to remember that when you're in it, but just try to hold on to that somewhere inside and remember that classic saying of "this too shall pass." So I think I'm going to wrap it up here, give my voice a rest, and yeah, we will talk soon. And sorry I didn't finish this up, but yeah, there'll be a completion reel for this in the not too distant future. So yeah, thanks for stopping by tonight, and we will talk soon. Bye, guys.